that precedes the closing session. I would like you to come in the middle so that our speakers don't strain. If you can come in the middle, please. My supervisor, Professor Tina Steiner. If you could lead that side to come in the middle. If we can all come in the middle so that at least we see we are in one section. This place is too big. It seats 700 people. So when we go different places, it becomes so hard for us to, yeah. And my dean, Professor Sauda Namialo, is here, but she's here in a different capacity altogether. She's now our deputy principal. And I see my classmate coming in, Mrs. Caro Beyanga. Mrs. Caro Beyanga was my classmate, 1997, 2000. Thank you for coming. Yeah, of course I won't force people to come and sit in the middle, but I have made my plea that could you please come and we sit in the middle so that our panelists don't have to strain to see different corners of the room. Allow me to call the House to order so that we have the session that precedes the closing ceremony, where we are going to celebrate Goretti Kyomuhendo as one of Uganda's greatest writers. And in this particular session, we are celebrating one book of hers that has had several lives. The book started as a series in the newspaper, one of the Ugandan dailies, and then it became a novella, and now it has become a novel. And that is the book we call Whispers from Vera. And we have an artistic impression of the cover there, quite very beautiful. And our Martinez would call her a swag lady. If you look at the way she is, she's a swag lady. And we are going to really, really enjoy this session as we discuss this journey from a series in the newspaper to a novella to a novel. It reminds me of a very important book from the African continent called The Portable Banyan by the indomitable, amazing, angelic, if I'm allowed to say, Professor Isabel Hofmeyr, where she traces the journey of the Pilgrim's Progress from where it started up to the African continent. Here we are doing a different kind of tracing or mapping the journey of this book from a series in the newspaper to a novella to a novel. Allow me to call the people who are going to take us through this panel. The chairs are two, I think for gender balance. Professor Susan Chiguli, if I can borrow from Isaac, my teacher, my mentor, and my friend, and Dr. Edgar Nabtanyi, our head of department. These will be the chairs of the session. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then may I call the members of the panel to come forward. The author we are celebrating, Goretti Kyomuhendo. Afrigo Band. You should have come dancing to the Afrigo Band song, but it's too late, I think. We are going to have a panelist, my doctoral advisor. I had two doctoral advisors, Professor Tina Steiner and Professor Linda Spencer. My doctoral advisor, the one walking, you can enjoy her walk. Afrigo Band. Well. We're going to have my colleague and office mate, about whom I'm also proud to have taught during her undergraduate, Dr. Evelyn Cindy Magara. We are going to have one of the curators, the literary curators and managers we have in Uganda, the amazing Rachel Kiza. allow me to hand over the microphone. Oh, Isaac is also part of the panel. Oh, Isaac, I didn't see you as a panelist, but I saw you as a chair, and I thought you had handed over your chair to Dr. Edgar Nabutanye. May we have the core MC of this conference, Dr. Isaac Tibasima Mugole, to the floor. In Luganda, Mugole means groom, not bride, groom. So Dr. Isaac Tibasima graduated with his PhD this year, right? This year. So he's the latest doctor in our department, and perhaps the latest doctor in Makerere University, together with Dr. Babule. So I'll now hand over the microphone to the chairs, Professor Susan Chiguli and Dr. Edgar Nabutanye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, and we are so happy to have you here. We are so very happy to even have our guest of honor and our deputy principal being part and parcel of this discussion. We had not counted on it, so we feel really honored that you're present here to discuss with us this milestone in Goretti Kyomuhendo's writing career. We are two chairs, as they've told you, and we are going to start off this session by introducing Goretti, even though the MC has already started off on this journey. As you can see, we are a lineup. We are not joking. You can see, yeah, we've turned up in full force to discuss this book and hope that you will enjoy what comes out of this panel. And so I'm going to ask my boss and my immediate boss, because my bigger boss is there, she might just fire me. So my immediate boss to start off by telling us very, very briefly about Goretti from your point of view, because she will tell us from her point of view too.
Thank you, SK. Our guest of honor, you are most welcome. We don't take this for granted. We are really humbled that you are with us. To the delegates, as we get to the end of a very wonderful conference, thank you very much. Goretti Kyomuhendo Akiki. It so happens that we share Empako. For those of you who need explanation, it is a practice among the Babito that besides your name, there is an additional name, an endearment. So I happen to be married. They married me. And upon accepting me in their cohort, they gave me a pet name, which is Akiki, and it so happens that we share that. Besides that, it is really hard, in the time that I have, to give a professional biography of Akiki. You can imagine how much she has done in the last 30 plus years. It is interesting that she is trained as a business woman. That was her initial training. But I know there's a certain sense of business, there's a certain need of business acumen in the work she does now, but we know her as one of Uganda's best writers. She has published 4 novels. Her first was the first daughter. This was followed by, the first daughter is a story about a Ugandan girl. The trials and tribulations of a Ugandan girl, but it is also a story about the trials and tribulations of a Ugandan man in a changing society. Which has published a story, a novel that is based on the tragic recent history of the region, Secrets No More, which traces a story of a young woman, young girl, struggling to make sense of the traumatic reality of violence, of political violence in her country. She has published Whispers, which we are going to talk about, so let me skip that for a moment. And she has also published an important novel about Uganda's recent history called Waiting. It is about a young girl again, in a very difficult situation that which was brought about by the political challenges that the country has been engaging in. Besides her writing career, she happens to be the founding member and the first director of FemRight. There was a whole panel, and there are several books that FemRight has published that were discussed here. So the good work that FemRight has done, and the fact that it is still existing and thriving, not just existing but thriving, of course it goes to the foundational work that Akiki has done. And as a country and as a literary fraternity, we shall forever be grateful for what FemRight has contributed. She now runs Africa Writers Trust, and I think this is where interdisciplinarity comes in. Her business training has really kicked in here in terms of fundraising, in terms of organizing writers. Again, this is an important literary activism that we are proud to associate with. It has been a long career, it is still ongoing, so we shall leave the rest for historians, the literary historians, to engage with. I hand over back to my co-chair.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm just saying that besides Goretti being this famous high-flying writer, she's also a friend, and sometimes she's very clumsy. There's a time we went for dinner, and I think she did not realize that that little bowl of water they bring is not for drinking, but for washing hands. And so I had to call that little detail to attention for her. So I'm in this position where I'm a guardian angel to her. So don't be too deceived with these high-flying titles and accolades that my boss has just given. So I can see there are quite a number of people who enjoy gossip. So I invite you after this session. I would like to invite you, all of you who would like to know more about our escapades. I invite you after the discussion to approach me. I may decide to charge a fee, but it depends. So our guest of honor behind you is the man who keeps us thick. He's very quiet. He doesn't like to be introduced. He's called Mr. Godfrey Biaruhanga. That is the partner to Goretti. Yeah. Okay. So because we have very little time left. We are going to kickstart this conversation by having Goretti tell us about herself. So Goretti, who is Goretti Kyomuhendo as you know her? And please do not make it a long-winded story. We don't have a whole afternoon.
She's out to get me today. Good afternoon. I'm really, really very, very happy and excited to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming to support the work that I do, not just me, but fellow other writers, especially on this panel. So, Susan, before I say who I know I am, which is really very challenging, because as they say, we are three people. We are who we think we are what people know us to be, and we are who we actually are. So I'm just going to try. But before that, I would first want to say brief remarks. I hope I'm allowed. Susan is so commandeering this afternoon. I don't know what has gotten into her. So first of all, I would like to say how very pleased and happy I am to be participating in this Mashariki conference, because the first time I really wanted to participate was in 2015, but I was away, so I couldn't, even when I followed everything prior to the conference. And the second time was in Ethiopia. That was 2019. So 2019, I traveled all the way to Addis Ababa, and I was very, very excited. And then I think a day before, we got this announcement that it was not going to happen in Lalibela, where we were all headed to. And unfortunately, I couldn't go to Bahilda, so I just changed my ticket and returned to Kampala. So for me, this is a very special moment that I have finally participated in the Mashariki conference. I'd also like to extend very special gratitude to the Literature Department of Makerere University for having given me this platform to relaunch Whispers from Vera. We have been working back and forth probably for the last 4 or 5 months. The first meeting I had with Susan was in March. And that's when we discussed the possibility of relaunching this. And then after that, it has been back and forth with the emails. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you, Isaac. These are the 3 people I've been dealing with. This is a great platform, and I'm very appreciative. And I always want to say my thanks at the beginning, because I might forget, or we get to not to have the time. So I'd also like to extend my special thanks to Rachel. Rachel will be introduced. She's at the far corner there. So you might be wondering why Rachel is sitting among the doctors of literature when she's not yet one of them. But I'm sure Rachel will tell her own story. So, and I will be talking about the journey of Whispers. But Rachel is that fan of the book when we couldn't trace the soft copy, because this is 20 years back. So Rachel read the book, fell in love with it, and she kept asking me, what happened to this book? And I'd say, well, the publisher closed the shop, and the book went out of print, and it's now 20 years. So why don't we reissue it? And I said, well, I had 1,000,001 excuses, and one of them was failure to find the soft copy. We don't even think those computers were still in existence, where it was typed in around 2000. So Rachel quietly, without telling me, retyped the manuscript. From page 1, without telling me. And then one time she just forwarded an email saying, now what is your excuse? So that's how that's how we are relaunching Whispers today. I wouldn't have done it, believe me. I wouldn't have retyped it. Then the other person I would like to thank is my wonderful husband. We call him G. He has already been introduced. I keep saying the spouses of writers are the real heroes, because you really, really must want to get married to marry a writer. You really must want to, and you really must have those special qualities, which he has. So I thank you. Why are you laughing? So who am I? I would want to, Susan, I don't know how much, do I have 10 minutes? 3 minutes. So I'll just tell a very short story because I'll build on it. So when I was around 15 years, or 14, probably 14, I was raised in a small town, dusty town. My mother would be scandalized if I said dusty. She doesn't want me to say dusty, but it was dusty at that time, called Hoima. And for my formative years, I was raised by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. So around 13 years, I came across a copy of Things Fall Apart. My elder sister was in secondary school, and she was studying literature. And I was desperately trying to find material to read. So she came home with it during school holiday, and I landed on it, and I started reading it. And it so touched my life that I believed that Okwonko actually existed, and Umofia existed, and all those things existed. So I finished reading it, struggling with a few things. I had never left my grandmother's homestead. I'd never been to Kampala or anywhere else. So my world started and ended in my grandmother's homestead. So I thought Nigeria, where could Nigeria be? No idea. But I finished reading it, and then I drafted a letter. And guess to who? To Chinua Achebe. To the writer. And those days, the African Writers series used to have an address in the book, which must have been the address of the African Writers series. So I drafted the letter saying, thank you for writing this story. I would really want to meet Okwonko, and I would really want to visit Omofia. Can you make this happen? And I walked to the post office, which was probably 5 miles away, and posted the letter. And you can imagine I never got a response. And I was heartbroken. And I was about 14. Fast forward, in 1998, I was invited to London. I just published my 2 books. And who was there? Chinua Achebe. And he was in a wheelchair, as you know. And at tea break, he was all on his own, which was really surprising to me. So I just walked towards him. He looked up and saw me and said, are you from Africa? I said, yes. So come and sit here. Come and sit beside me. So we sat, and I told him, I wrote to you a letter. And he said, when? So probably it was maybe 20 years back. He said, and he smiled and said, I never received it. I said, yes, because you never replied. So tell me what was in the letter. I said, I wanted to meet Okwonko. And come to Umofia. But of course, now I knew I'd gone to secondary school, studied literature. And I said, but I also wanted to know your first name. Because when I was writing to him, I said, how do you address him? Dear Achebe, dear Chinua Achebe, because I had been raised to respect elders, so I was unsure how to address him. So what is your first name? Albert, he told me. I'll stop here for now, and this story will make sense later when I start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Goretti, and we would like to actually also know how many other writers you have met, but because we are focusing on Whispers from Vera, we'll leave it at that for now. And I would like to still ask you to tell us briefly what the journey of this novel we are launching today is in brief.
Very briefly. So, Whispers from Vera, I started writing it as a newspaper column in the newspaper then called The Crusader, which had started probably in 1996. And I just had this idea of two women in conversation. So it was in a letter form. One sister was based in Kampala and the other was based in Hoima. And they were exchanging communication about how different their lives were. Vera, who was based in the city, was modern. You know, she was a career woman, and her sister was a housewife. But at the same time, there were crossovers between their two lives. So I wrote it for 1 year and a bit, and then the Crusader closed down. And I thought that was the end of, it wasn't called Whispers from Vera, because I think every week they would give it a different title. Then the Monitor Publications launched a publishing arm of the newspaper called Monitor Books. So one of them approached me and said, we followed your column in the Crusader. Why don't you turn it into a novel? And I said, really, would that work? Yeah, you know, everybody likes it, and we think you can write it as a novel. So I started writing it as a novel. So this is around probably 1999, 2000. And I removed the sister, so I just focused on Vera as the main character, but brought in a little bit of her sister's life. And then it was published in 2002. And also, maybe I forgot to mention, the other exciting thing is the first edition, which was published in 2002, was launched here at Makerere in July 2002. I was talking to Professor Natukunda at lunchtime, and she was at that conference, and she bought a copy. And she says it is signed. And the conference was called Gender Worlds. I think it was the 8th edition, July 2002. So that's when we launched it. Now, after that, the Monitor Publications, they sold off the rights of the books that they were publishing to another publisher. And that publisher didn't have a long life, I think collapsed after just 1 year, without reissuing Whispers from Vera, which had sold the initial 2,000 copies within about 6 months, and then it went out of print. So it has been out of print for 20 years, and now reissued as a much bigger novel. I think it's double the size of the first edition.
Thank you, Akik, for that history. The trials of being a writer is that you write your book, and then you get people, most of them who are in this room, and they start assigning labels and implying things that are in the book and others that they think are in the book. And that is why I want to turn to my sister, Professor Linda, who introduced the term chick-lit in reference to this novel in her PhD thesis. So Linda, tell us what chick-lit means and how does it relate to, or what is chick-lit in this novella?
Susan gave me this question about defining chick-lit and why do critics call this book chick-lit. I thought, I gave this, I'm the one who called it chick-lit. Which other critics have called it chick-lit? But, so chick-lit is genre fiction, just the same as sci-fi or crime fiction or romance. And for me, one of the arguments I make is that chick-lit comes after romance fiction as a genre. There's a trajectory, and after romance is chick-lit. And chick-lit as a genre mainly looks at, so we all know romance. How many of you have read Mills and Bones? Do not be afraid, because I'm sure all of you have read Mills and Bones somewhere. Your mom's Mills and Bones, your aunt's Mills and Bones, someone in boarding school, you've read a Mills and Bones. So Mills and Bones is about a hero and a heroine. A boy meets girl, they have a problem, they love each other, they like each other, they fall in love, they have a problem, they resolve it, they get married. There's a happily ever after. Chick lit is a bit different. What you have in chick lit is you have, like all genre fiction, their characteristics and features that make it chick lit. And I don't think Goretti had this in mind when she was writing the book, but I read it as that, because it had all the features. And I was looking in my thesis at African romance and African chick lit. And so when I read Whispers from Vera, I saw it had these features. So what are these features? The features are, there has to be a group of friends, female friends. There has to be, the most important thing in these women's friendship is with themselves. So the men are not as important. Chick lit also deals with romantic relationships, but the men come in and out of these relationships. The women are steady, which is different from romance fiction. But the other thing is, most of these women, and there might be 3, 4, 5 women, most of these characters are in their 30s. So with romance, we're looking at early 20s. In chick lit, we're looking at 30-something female characters. But also, these women are working because they've gained from, they've gained from, women's advancement and empowerment in society. So they're all working, and because they tend to concentrate on their jobs, and because the men are not as important, they leave marriage until later on. Now, what that means is that they also, because they're working, they have they have money. They don't have children, but they have disposable income. And because of that disposable income, they're able to concentrate on themselves and luxury goods. And so, they go out, there's a lot of me time. There's a lot of, manicures and pedicures and spas. That's what they do, and that's where they spend their money, but also these places where they spend their time, and these spaces of being together as women is reminiscent of girls' boarding schools or societies where women get together. And so what we have in chick lit is a real concentration on women. But because they're also in their 30s, and because they're independent, and because they've gained from the all about the advances of women empowerment, one of the things that is important about them is that they're very sexually liberated. And so they see themselves not as sexual objects, which you see in romance fiction, but they see themselves as sexual subjects. So they're not afraid to talk about sex and sexuality and eroticism. And I don't know if a Ugandan audience won't be able to, but I can read you excerpts from the very first 5 pages of Goretti's book. So Whispers has all these things, but it has all these characteristics unknowingly that for Goretti, but what I read. And so for me it was important because when I was reading it against South African chick lit, because Has comes before South African chick lit. But what is also really important is that, and when you're talking about the journey, one of the, and for those of, please tell me when I have to stop. 2 minutes, okay. So one of the things, if we're thinking about chick lit, most of, what made chick lit as a genre popular is Sex and the City. Sex and the City and Bridget Jones's Diary. Sex and the City in the US and Bridget Jones's Diary in the UK. Both of those books started off as serialized columns in newspapers. And so as I was reading, I realized that Whispers also started as a serialized column in a newspaper. And so it made it easy for me to start drawing these links. But also more importantly, the two other features is that chick lit tends to be a first-person narrative from the point of view of the female protagonist. And the other thing that I want to say before I hand over is that it's very humorous. It's these female characters who don't take themselves seriously, who laugh at themselves. And all these things I found in Goretti's novel.
Thank you.
Thank you. He doesn't want the microphone. Right. Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you for that explanation. I think people ought to pay you for this lecture that you've given them. And I was playing safe. I knew I read it from your dissertation, but I know you academics. So if I had just said Linda or whatever, you would have said, but I know so-and-so also talked about it. So I was playing safe, but you still caught me out. Now to Dr. Tibasima. I would like, Dr. Tibasima, I would like you to learn to give eye contact to the person talking to you. Right. Right. I want you to read, just to read to us, page 154 of the novel, not of the novella, but of the novel. Page 154, and the little strand, the little bit ending of the paragraph to page 155, but just the end. And please read clearly and loudly.
Once your teacher, always your teacher. Aha! So page 154. Samson won the election. His opponents are crying foul. They allege...
Maybe this one?
Okay.
We want them to hear. So. Could you stand up?
Samson won. So, Samson won the election. His opponents are crying foul. They allege all kinds of electoral malpractices that characterized the by-elections. They have gone to court. Simanyi names of people who died long ago were never removed from the voters' register. Imposters voted using the names of the dead. Simanyi Samson's campaign agents ferried aliens from the neighboring country who voted using forged IDs. Simanyi some polling stations opened as early as 4, and by 10, as people were preparing to go to vote, they were all closing. Simanyi campaign agents of Samson's opponents and other potential voters were beaten up by the military and detained until the voting exercise was over. And others were forced to cast already ticked ballot boxes in favor of Samson.
So I'd like to ask you about you probably need to translate Simanyi.
Simanyi is part of rumor. There are stories that have been told, and so you're thinking, okay, I was going to say another Luganda word, which is over, but more like
I
don't know, but this is what I hear. That's
but
more
we
the
have
idea.
A professional translator. That's it? Right. So this is what I would like you then to explain to us on why is the rumor strategy so important to this novel? Is it effective, or does it reinforce stereotypes about women?
Thank you. I'm careful saying this because we have a rumor scholar in this room.
She's not on the platform.
Oh, thankfully. the rumor scholar in this room, please don't catch me off guard. But I read your question, and I read back this page and started thinking, this is quite interesting. Because many years ago when we had UTL, there was a famous billboard which had two women at the extreme end. And so one woman says Chikati, and the other one says Lumpe. Those who know Luganda know what that means. So Chikati is what now? And then the other one says, tell me the story. I read this book, and especially Vera's Whispers, and I may be wrong, but like Susan says, this is how we academics pretend to know things. Rumor for me, especially as I read this, offered insights into the mind of not just Vera, but also the characters that she talks about in her community. And in many ways, she acts to me as a judge of not just herself, but her community. How she sees the women, how she sees the men, how she sees relationships, how she sees the relationship that she has with Eric, or the relationship Eric has with Martina, the relationship Eric has with Nina, and the relationship Eric has with the mother. But also the relationships with her friends, whether it is Sheila or Ben or Samson, and all these things and how they work out. And what she is doing with this rumor is that she is becoming a commentator to me of these women and these men. And for her, and like Linda said, there is this liberated woman who feels free to speak about these people, and she feels she has the right to think the way she thinks about them. So that place that she takes for me is really not a place where she's saying I'm judging them. She's saying this is what I think about them. So these are the stories I've had, and these are the stories that I want to say. But what is really interesting, and this comes from the title, is that it is whispers. It is her mind. It's I'm not saying these things loudly because I don't want the person next to me to hear them. But well, these are my thoughts. And what that does is that as they become commentaries on the lives of these people, what she's actually doing is that she is creating a network around herself that helps her to understand the people she's working with and her relationship with them. And in a way, her interaction with these people, even from her mindset, is then seen, and you can really think about it. Now, the thing about rumor and women reminds me of the famous Mrs. Kanda in School for Scandal. The woman who says, tale bearers are as bad as tale makers. And as soon as she makes that statement, she starts a string of rumor. A very interesting string of rumor. There is a famous statement people make that when women meet, they discuss people and tell rumors about people. When men meet, they discuss serious issues. I have heard, Prof, I'm not, but what this book is also saying, Cindy says it's a rumor. But what it is also saying is, and for me, rumor is important for this one reason. Rumor reminds us of the reality that we all love a good story. And because we are human beings, we always want to know what's going on in the life of another person. What Vera is really doing is that she's not just talking about herself. She's talking about everyone. She's talking about how she relates with everyone. She's also talking about how others relate with each other. And in doing that, she is asserting the reality that what I go through and what I go through and what everyone goes through is important to me, is important to you, is important to this whole community, and therefore we need to sit and really think about these issues. It is who we are as human beings. Our humanity is then asserted in the kind of stories that she is telling. And for me, that is one of the strengths of the rumor thing here. About the women, there is a stereotype, of course, about them that is, see the way Halima is presented in the text, or see the way Sheila is presented in the text. And how these women's stories for Vera become important to say, they actually say this, but maybe they are wrong. Maybe they just have what she calls nugu. You see? Maybe... this jealousy. Maybe they just have the nugu and the jealousy. Maybe it is this and the other. But then she is not sure. And that not being sure is what probably forces me as a reader to keep saying, I think I need to read what she's thinking. And that's why, in all honesty, I love this because you read it and you do not want to stop thinking about who is the next story about. And I'm sorry I'm a man, but I love stories. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Isaac. Right. I'm going to go on to the next. Rachel, it's Rachel first. Rachel, please hold the microphone. I hope yours works.
Yeah. It does work.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. First, you went without politely asking the owner, and you started typing her book. You are something, right? Now you typed someone else's book without their permission, and so I presume you read it.
I typed it after I had read it.
You read Whispers from Vera as a novella.
Yes.
So, why are you reading it again? What's your problem? That's the question.
Okay, so I think I typed it in 2020, and I remember, because like Isaac, I love stories. And when I read Vera, I immediately connected with her. And like Linda said, with Vera, there's a lot of liberation for her. And her story was so relevant for me. By then I was 20-something. So I think at that point I was really feeling very liberated. I wanted to talk about sex more. I wanted to talk about so many things that Vera was grappling with. And so Vera was my person. I was like, I see myself in her. And I remember telling Goretti, you know what, I think you need to do this book again because everyone needs to read Vera. They need to relate with her more than ever. And I'm glad that she said yes, so I'm glad that so many of my friends can read this book and we can discuss it and talk about it. But why am I reading it again? After I typed it up.
Why are you reading it as a novel?
Yeah, as a novel now. We discussed it with her and we were pointing out things that she didn't do well. And Goretti cannot do wrong in my sight. I love her too much, I respect her too much, so she can't do any wrong in my sight. But we pointed out things in the book when we were discussing it, because I worked with African Writers Trust for 4 years. So we had the back and forth discussions about the novella and things that could be done better, and some of them were character development. So Vera is such a memorable character, but the other characters were really very silent. You didn't get a feel of them. And then there were inconsistencies in plot. So there were so many techniques that were lacking, and because she wrote it back then, but now as a seasoned writer, there's so much that has changed in the book. So for people who are going to read the novel are going to get a much better deal. They will enjoy it more because so many of the characters, this about Samson, I hope the audience is wondering who Samson is and what happened in the election, because before you couldn't get a feel of that, but now the character is so grounded. The book, in short, is really beefed up. The techniques are there. Everything makes so much sense. When she's talking about, there's so many things now so many inconsistencies that now have been filled in. So the book is really beautiful, it's bigger, it's better, and I'm very excited for everyone to read it. So I hope everyone walks away with a copy. Please buy the book.
Thank you, Rachel. Listening you speak reminds me of an Achebe statement. The elders of Omofia Progressive Society listened to the secretary and remarked to themselves, what a sharp young man. In this case, what a sharp young woman. She deserves a PhD by herself. Which leads me to another Achebe quotation. Akiki, you wondered why she is on this panel. Achebe says that when a child washes his hands or her hands, she will surely feast with the kings. Thank you, Rachel, for starting a new journey for this novel. I now get to sing Dr. Magara Amoti. You've taught Whispers.
Yeah.
You've taught Whispers, but you've taught Kyomuhendo as a special author. I wanted to know why Kyomuhendo, why Whisper, and what is the significance of Whispers in the broader work of Goretti?
Okay, thank you so much. For me, reading Whispers from Vera, then I think I was an MA student who was... reading Whispers from Vera as a student, then later reading it as someone who has joined the faculty. At that time, I wasn't, because I joined as a teaching assistant, I wasn't allowed to head a course, but I was already inspired by the freedom of Vera. As in, you can do anything, you can make any decision. So upon getting my master's, I'm allowed by my elders to choose a course to teach. I said, okay, wow, I think like Vera, I'm going to do selected author, and I will choose who I want to teach. And for long, we were taught all sorts of authors. For me now, at that time, I was also thinking as a Ugandan, we are having a prolific writer, Ugandan. She has 3 novels to her name. One of them, the first daughter, is taught in secondary school. It's a favorite to many. The young adults I'm dealing with can relate with this story so closely. She's done another novel, Waiting. She's done Secrets No More. And all these novels from the first daughter, which is dealing with someone in countryside. Then you have Vera, which is dealing with someone now in the city. Then you have Waiting, looking at the war situation in Uganda. Secrets No More, going transnational. Yeah, war in Rwanda, then spilling over to Uganda. So I felt from the range of themes, a Ugandan student in an African university, or even someone studying in an African university would enjoy. And it would be good, unlike what Goretti felt, get really enchanted, get excited, and maybe you can write to the author and get a reply. Yeah? Yeah? You're going to find names that you know. And as you heard, there was another annex to my name, Amoti. So I'm also from those, broadly we are all Luo from Egypt, the great pharaohs, migrating, following the Nile. Some of us who have that other extra name attached to your name. I felt, yeah, why not start with this person? And in addition to the novels, the 3 novels and the novella then, there was... Goretti has 3 children's texts, and I was introduced to children's literature at master's level as a student. Now I'm currently teaching it, and in this country where our children grapple with what to read or even what to watch on TV, I felt I need to introduce my students to Goretti's books. And Chair, if you allow, I'll tell Goretti that these texts can't be found. One of them is Sarah and a Boy Soldier. My students can't find them. Justice Saves His Uncle, in addition to the 4 novels. A Chance to Survive, those are children's texts. So you can see from this, she had 7 titles, and there are lots of critical work on Goretti's books. So I felt that was a full package. We couldn't exhaust everything, and the students were really enchanted. 20th anniversary of Whispers from Vera. With all that it has gone through, we are reading a novel from a novella. To be honest, I read it again. In this, I felt all the words, all the other extra stories I wanted Vera to tell me, I get them, but I still want more. You ended with to be continued. I don't know whether we will have a 40th anniversary. Yeah? Then you continue. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, a piece of advice to Amoti. For those scarce books, you don't tell Goretti. Whisper to the other.
Thank you. Now we go to the other Moti. Isaac, this novel is about a young woman grappling with living in her context, trying to be who she is, where she is, right? So why did you read it? Because you just admitted in your introduction that you are a man. What are you doing reading a young woman? Why are you reading chick lit? Why is he reading chick lit?
The people who know me personally, this is a self-revelation, know I was brought up by a woman, a single mother who, okay, these moments, No, for my mom it's not a rumor, but my mom had this sense of independence as a woman, and I will say this openly. I saw my father at about 6-7 years. He died when I was about 11, 12 years. So my mom seemed to be this strong pillar in my life, to the point that when she died, I felt a certain sense of me was gone, totally gone. And so I was thinking about this and reading this book and how it resonates with my own personal life. And what I see Vera going through, I will say this, I should not say it because you don't say certain things about the dead. The things that Vera goes through that I saw my mother going through, interestingly. And you know, there's this thing they say about psychology, that we are pulled to books that seem to talk about us. So I've had this problem that when I've seen Heathcliff, and I've said this to people and they've quarreled with me, I've said Heathcliff is my hero and I've almost been strangled. But Vera, for me, is someone who has a strength that reminds me of my own mother, that reminds me of a woman who chose to say, I will bring up my 3 children on my own, and I don't need a man to do it. She actually didn't say that, but she did that. And so when I was reading this came back to mind, and you want to rethink this, you know, and you ask yourself the questions, but why did my mother do this? And then you see Vera and you're thinking, maybe this is why my mother did this. But then you also know that you don't know your mother's story. And you know the funny thing is that you actually don't know Eric's story. Because Vera says, I don't know what happened between Eric's mother and father, you see. And I've told people, I don't know what happened between my mother and my father. What I know is that my father was a good man, in all honesty, by the way. And these are things, of course, I got to understand and learn many years after his death. Because then, like I love Ruma, I actually had stories about my father that made me rethink how I'd thought about him. Sister and I have had this conversation about my dad. And there's a book we're working on with someone, and this person said, I knew your father in Nyakasura school. And I'm thinking, really? And the reason was, he said, there was a boy called Tiwasima, and he was the only Muslim with me in the school. That's why I remember your father. So you think about this, and you think about stories that you read, and how they resonate with your life. They resonate with many things about you. I mean, it's the same experience I had with Sons and Lovers. It's the same experience I've had with, say, characters like Heathcliff. And this, for me, brings me back to the reality of my own experience, but also to rethink how sometimes we judge people without really understanding them. And for me, that happened with my father, especially. So when this came to me and I was reading it, it's the same questions that, of course, came up. But maybe people need to understand that you don't just simply judge people without thinking about them. Because you imagine that you know a lot, and then you realize many years later, you were wrong. And that is the thing that forced me to read this again and again.
Thank you, Aitike. Let's turn to Rachel. I think in your introductory remarks, you did mention why this book was important and why you took the initiative. Books are important for two reasons. One, because of what they say, and two, because of how they say what they say. And this brings us to the issue of humor in whispers. Could you say something about humor, how it works, and how it is an important aspect of this novella, now novel?
Okay, thank you very much. One thing, and I was asking, as I was speaking to Goretti during the lunch break, and I was telling her about this question after Dr. Susan sent through the questions. And my initial thought is, as Ugandans, we process through humor. It's our coping mechanism. We laugh at things. With everything bad happening in this country, there's a meme, there's a video, there's something that makes us laugh at it, and we forget the problem. And I feel like with Goretti using humor in the book, it relates so well to our audience because that's just how we process things. I mean, Vera discusses such difficult things, but we are laughing with her as she's laughing at herself, as she discusses about, okay, we don't want to give spoilers, but with her, the things she's grappling with her husband, and then with her in-laws, things that are so relatable to us. And we're just laughing through the book. We're just laughing through it. So with humor, the book is very pleasing. It pushes the plot forward. Like Isaac said, he wanted to just continue reading the book. And that's the thing, you will not put the book down. You will want to read and then just know what is Sheila planning, what is Isaac, no, not Isaac, what is Eric planning, what is so-and-so doing. So that's it. The humor just really pushes the plot forward. The characters themselves are so funny. Everything is just funny. But then when you're done, you're like, she was really discussing important issues in the book, but I was laughing through it all. Is that right? I don't know, but that's really just our coping mechanism as Ugandans. We just laugh through things. We just laugh through it. Even our president, we just laugh at him and we're like, you know what, that's okay. To this day, I still remember the time when he dissected the posho and on national TV. Wow. So yeah, that's what humor does. We just really cope with it. It helps us cope through things.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Indeed, it is true we like our rumors, and I think one president described Kampala as a city of 7 hills and 8 rumors. But we also like humor, and I think Dr. Spire Sentongo says something really clever, as only Sentongo can say things that are clever. Of course, humor is very important in whispers, and it helps, us relate to the serious issues that the novella is engaging with. Coming to Cindy, some of these are relationships, the complicated relationships between a wife and mother-in-law, a stepdaughter, the relationship with your spouse. There's this Ugandan concept of olusirika. You live in the same house, you sleep in the same bed, but you have a retreat from each other, and then you use the children to communicate, tell your father, tell your mother. What is your sense of those complicated relationships? ECM.
Just you trying to explain further, you see how everybody is laughing. When you read Whispers from Vera, you're like, oh my God. This is something I've experienced with my neighbor, or I've gone through it as a person. When Martina, that is the stepchild, came in, I was like, oh Lord, this is really going to be personal, because I've also had a stepmother. I was like, how is it going to pan out? Will she be like my stepmother, or will she be like me? Because sometimes you think it's the stepmother who is bad, but when the stepmother is good, the child is bad. When the child is good, the stepmother is that typical stepmother. So I think everyone, because most of us have had these experiences, because first, maybe we need to go back. How does even a stepchild come in the picture? Or even how does even Vera get married to Eric? It's almost like a one-night stand, and the child has come, and they are cohabiting. Vera is scared of her very religious, traditional mother. Most of us have such mothers. So whatever you read, whatever you experience, it's almost like your living experience. And when you're reading Whispers from Vera, it's almost, at a personal level, you feel like somebody's whispering your secrets. In fact, I pitied at that time Goretti's friends. I'm like, is she talking about her friends? One of them is actually my aunt. I'm like, what have I heard about my aunt? Could she be Sheila? Or, am I getting this story belatedly? But really, the relationships are so real, so natural to what we go through. And what liberates you is that you're reading it from someone's experience, and it is so true because she's whispering to you, she's telling you her secrets, which makes it very believable. And now, as a critic, you read Whispers from Vera, you're like, yeah, this is a well-thought, an author who thinks about what she's putting on paper. In the end, how does she portray the dynamic, especially between a stepchild and a stepmother? In the end, they become they are close friends. The stepmother is really doing the mothering role. It's like Vera is this epitome of a mother. She's struggling to be a perfect mother amidst all the challenges of a working class woman who wants to enjoy her life. And maybe besides the humor and how we cope with the absurdities and all the challenges that have happened to us in this country. For once you read a novel where there is no war, at least, you're like, yeah, there is no war, there is no... people are having fun, they're going for barbecue, they mind how they look, it's as if everything is perfect. And so many of us who idealize about that perfect life, you're like, yeah, I just want to be like Vera, and I'll give my mother-in-law such an attitude. If she doesn't want to talk to me, I won't talk to her. But also in the end, with all the complexities which happen in life, relationships are worked out, which I find very interesting. So the novel, in a way, as cheeky as it might be, guides you. Yeah, guides you on how to, you're able to cope something, on how to really maneuver through life.
Thank you so much, Cindy. We are now about to wind up. We have two more questions. One to you, Linda. Do you read Goretti Kyomuhendo as a writer or a woman writer? And could you tell us why?
Can I look in the eye, Susan? I want all my South African friends to see how bossy you are, because they think I'm bossy. But now they must see that it's somewhere like they're worse people than I am. I read Goretti as a woman writer, and I'm not going to apologize for that, Goretti. And the reason I read her, first of all, because Goretti was one of the directors of FemRight. She has been very involved in FemRight, and the whole agenda of FemRight was to promote women's writing in Uganda. And also, when I was doing my thesis, I was looking, I remember people have spoken about Professor Isabel Hoffman. I don't know what I wanted to do. And she said, aren't there any women writers in Uganda? And I said, no. And she said, are you sure? And then I said, let me ask one more time before I go and convince about something I'm not sure about. And I found FemRight, and I found women writers who I hadn't grown up with. And I think Goretti herself, in that, I don't know if it's in Women Writing Africa or it's in the other one where she says she's a woman writer from Uganda. And so I read her as a woman writer because also the concerns in all her books, I mean, Cindy has laid it out quite nicely in a way that I hadn't really. All her books talk about something different. But what is at the center of all her books is the way in which is women's experiences, women's interiority. And for those of you who think, okay, chick lit, and who think we're just fluffing around and it's not a serious genre, the other way I do read this Whispers of Vera is, for those of you who have read So Long a Letter, there's also some, I don't know if there was a deliberate intertextuality, but like Goretti just said, when she started writing it, it was a letter from Vera to her sister. And in So Long a Letter, what you have a letter from Ramotolai to Isa too. But what she does in what Ramotolai does in So Long a Letter is to take a journey into herself and to reflect on how she has got to this point where she's in mourning and her husband has abandoned her with her daughter's best friend, Binatu, and what has happened in those 3 years. And if you think about, if you read So Long a Letter, it's the same things that she's raising. It's about women's positions in marriage. It's the things that Isaac, Cindy, and also Rachel are picking up on: romantic relationships. Not only romantic relationships, the family dynamics. It's about children. It's about being a wife and a woman. Because for Maria Maba, I mean in Ramotolai and Isa too reacts differently to the second wife. Whereas Ramotolai decides to stay, and she says she decides to stay because she cannot think of herself outside of a marriage. And so those issues that Maria Maba raises, or Flora Nwapa or Buchi Macheta in The Joys of Motherhood, all these issues are the same issues that Goretti raises in all her books. And so that's why I'm not apologetic about, I mean, she's a writer. I mean, I don't see what the problem is. But for me, because she raises and she speaks about women's issues and women's interiority, that's why I call her women.
Thank you, Linda. It would have been interesting to do a poll of who is bossier between. But we're running out of time, and that is why I'm standing up. As we close, Akika, I would like you to say something about the important work you are doing now with African Trust. But hold that question, it wouldn't be right for us to not to have a response to people who have come to listen to you, your readers. So we're opening these 3 questions. Please, under a minute, ask one question, ideally to Goretti. Maybe to the critics, but yes, we have Professor Natukunda, Professor Chiimba, and where's the other one? Okay, and the question this side. Professor Natukunda, and a minute.
And a minute. Thank you very much. Goretti, you know we have followed you we as friends, as comrades in the struggle, as advocates for women's rights. But this I'm asking from the angle of languages. You talked about a Kiki and a Moti, and I seem to see that you're also bringing up the sensitivity to our culture as Banyakitara. When are we having a translation into the local languages?
Thank you, Professor Natukunda, Professor Chimba.
Thank you. Thank you,
Nasamula, can you?
It works. Chair, before I ask my question, allow me to very quickly congratulate Isaac. He looks so terribly outnumbered up there. Now for Goretti, I know we've had this conversation with you before about your characters, both male and female, but I now want you to address one aspect of this publicly. The women characters that you create in your novels, and indeed the Stephen character in First Daughter, are these characters that you would like to see in the Ugandan society, or are they characters that you've seen emerging in some corners of this society?
Thank you, Professor Chimba. And congratulations, Aitike.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Stephen. I wish to know from the wonderful writer that you have shown me today. Back in Kenya, we're going to read you. Now, yes, because it's a wonderful writing and all that. Now, do I hear some polemic or political whispers from the excerpt that my friend Isaac read? Is there some nuances of that, or? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. For maybe a Ugandan idiocracy, whispers of Vera. Vera is a shortened form of Veronica. In Uganda, sometimes when we like someone very much, we cut the name short. And I had this problem in school. My name, Nabutanyi, would be cut. Okay. Kiki is generous.
Yeah, thank you very much, our Chair. And it's a pleasure to be asking Goretti this question about our work, about 2022 is 2020. 2022, I think, is when I asked you about Whispers from Vera when on the program that I was hosting, Writer's Dawn on UBC. At that time. Now I want to go back to the Vera, the novella, and then the Vera that you have written. Kindly just share the experience, or what you take from this experience of having to, do I say rewrite? But to render again a story of a story that you had already written. I think this could be of significance for some of the people who are still in writing. People like Wallace Oyinka, I think, who was said to have said if he was given an opportunity, perhaps write another The Lion and the Jewel.
Thank you. I'll answer briefly, and please note that the conversation can continue afterwards. So I'll start with the last one, so I don't forget. What was the process like of rewriting, reworking? As one journalist who is interviewing me about this, he just said, "Also, you have refreshed it." And I said, how wonderful that would be. So easy, you just click the button, refresh, and it's all done. So it has been a very challenging process for me. In fact, I don't know if I would have done it if I had thought through it carefully. Because as Rachel says, 2020, she sends me this email, and then lockdown happens. And then she kept saying, well, another excuse, 2 years of lockdown. So for me, many challenges. I'll just point out one, that writing is a craft in which we continuously grow and evolve as writers. And looking back at 2000, when the book was first written and published, and the 20 years I've spent in the writing field, when I started reading it, the first things I would do was to cringe and say, but how could I have said that? How could I have done that? How could I? And nearly stopped halfway through the process. And then the other thing was thinking of my fans, of the readers of the first edition. How faithful was I going to be to the first edition? Rachel has already mentioned, I worked with a couple of editors, by the way, because my argument was, when I wrote the novel, I was in that age range. The target group for this novel is between 29 and 40 years. So I was in that age range, and these things came easily to me. Now I was writing it as a 58-year-old woman, and I assembled a team of about 4 of them who are in that age range. And one of the phrases I used in the first one is, my Prince Charming. So I was asking Rachel, do you guys still use these things? Of my Prince Charming, or that is old-fashioned for a woman of my age. So for me, that was a very challenging process. But I'm glad, as Rachel said, they kept pointing out, now, these days, every woman of our age has to have a second job, has to do an online course, has to register for a professional course, which wasn't at that time when I first wrote it. So some of those things are embedded in the new novel. And then another thing I had in the first edition was, when during Christmas time, the man will say, okay, we are going to visit my mother in the village and the children. So I was asking Rachel, do you guys still go to the village for Christmas? Or do you now go to Dubai or South Africa? Have these things changed? I said, yeah, but who would go to the village? There's no water. The kids don't speak the language. Yeah, so I actually removed that scene. It's not in the new edition now. So those are some of the challenges I went through. But on the whole, I enjoyed it because I would laugh with Vera. I said, but Vera, but really, how can you say that? So I enjoyed that. But the challenge was remaining faithful to the old text, at the same time writing as I write now and not as I wrote 20 years back. Then the politics in Whispers, it's a story about life. And if you live in Africa, I keep saying that you cannot afford to be apolitical. I keep saying that if you are in Europe and you have a job where you work from Monday to Friday, 1st to 30th of the month, you get paid, as in the contract. If you go to the train, to catch a train, the train will be there. So you can afford to be apolitical because your life is okay. When I'm in the UK and you listen to the kids on TV being asked, who's the Prime Minister of UK? And I said, I don't know. Brown? Cameron? I don't know. And I say, wow, you can afford to be that. You can't afford to be that in Africa. Politics is integral to your life. So yes, there is politics as it is in our daily lives. We have to be political. You have to question things. Your salary doesn't come at the end of the month. You have to find out, why didn't I get my salary? Oh, the money was taken to fight a war in the neighboring country. So you have to get interested in that. Why don't I have water in my house? Or because somebody ordered that because they wanted political capital or political gain, decided to channel the water and take it to another village. So you have to know and worry why you don't have water in your house. In Europe, you'll have water flowing throughout, so you don't need to question that. So there is politics in this novel. Female characters, is that what I want to see? Or do I write about the female characters that exist? So I'll use, I think this is, no, I'll answer this separate from the translation. All my novels, my heroines are, protagonists are female. Strong women, women who push back boundaries, women who question and interrogate things, women who can stand on their own. And sometimes I wonder if that is me. Somebody is behind me saying, he's agreeing. So probably, yes, I write about the woman that probably I am, not fully, but the woman I would want to see. The woman I would want to see challenging all these things. So Vera, I think, is the strongest of the characters I've ever written. And she does things that I'm unable to do. She does things that she says things I'm unable to say. So yes, two ways that I look up to these women and I feel drawn to them to create my characters around them. And I say, yeah, that's the woman I would want to have in my novel. But at the same time, when I'm writing them, I also push them and say, you can be a little more than that. The decisions that Vera makes in this novel are very difficult decisions. I don't know if I would make them, but I know women who have done that. I know women who have really pushed themselves, gone for those promotions, done what it takes to save their marriages. So yes, to answer your question both ways, that sometimes these women already exist, but when I'm creating them, I still push them a little more than the women the female characters that I know already. Translation. This will take me back to how I started telling you about my story of growing up in Hoima with my grandmother, and she introduced me to storytelling. She was a wonderful storyteller. And when I started writing, my one thing was, I wish she could read my stories. I really wish she could read. She was a non-English user, but I think she could read a little bit. So this is something I have thought about, but also the reality is, I think it's Osman Sembene who said that as African writers, Africa is our audience, but the West is our market. So I think we grapple with that. There are about less than 1 million users of my local language, which is Runyoro, less than 1 million people. And out of that, I don't know how many are able to read. How many are able to write? Probably half of that. So when I'm able to write in my local language. But if you look at the publishing side of it, publishing is a business. Writing is a passion. So the two have to be reconciled. If I wrote in my local language, who is my target? I know I don't want to go there with the Ngugi and the politics of the language, but I keep saying Ngugi wrote in English. Why didn't Ngugi start, Weep Not Child and the River Between in Kikuyu? He established himself. He can afford to sit back and write in Kikuyu, and the world will fall over its feet to translate him into the languages that they need. So I'm just being pragmatic that I wish, it's a wish, I could write in my local language and then wait for the publishers to call me and say, can we translate this into Spanish or French or English? But at the same time, I know it's not going to happen. So I continue writing in English and also believing that English is no longer a foreign language to me. English is part and parcel of who I am, of my identity, and also believing that literature is about communication, is about putting my word out there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm being asked to conclude the panel. But we need to launch the book. Yeah. So I thought that it's our job to moderate and their job to direct the launching.
Okay, wait, SK, wait. I think Goretti would love to have the company of the panel as you launch your book, right? Right? Or they can go away. Yeah, they will stay. Maybe we shall ask Mr. Godfrey to join. Behind a very strong woman, there's a very strong man. Yeah, and we shall ask our deputy principal today, the dean, our dean, but now today the deputy principal, to bring the guest of honor forward for the launch. And then we shall ask the guest of honor to go back to his seat as we do the closing ceremony. Oh. Yeah, and the representative of the Goretti Institute, please, who have kindly sponsored this session. Do you have the representative of the Goretti Institute to come for the launch? It will take like 1 minute and it will be done. Yeah, it will be done. So we're asking the guest of honor to come to be part of the launch, and then we shall ask him to take his seat as we do the closing ceremony. Do we have the representative of the Goretti Institute? Yes. Please come forward to be part of the... Okay, there's a change in the program. The book will be launched as the guest of honor gives his speech. So I will ask the DJ to give us the Afrigo band song that the panelists will dance to as they take their seats. But don't move before the song starts. Don't move